This here is the new Guerrilla 450. It is based on the Royal Enfield 450, and apart from sharing the engine and some bit of the chassis, there is also a bit of the special magic that we saw in the Himalayan being translated here. This comes into a segment which is crowded in terms of models. This will go up against the likes of the KTM 390, you've got the Harley Davidson X440, you've got the Hero Mavrick, as well as a segment, or let's say with little less engine capacity, the BMW G310R and of course the Apache RTR 310. The segment might be crowded in terms of number of models, but it's not really done well or done as well as it should in terms of potential when it comes to sales. Can the Guerrilla change that? Has Royal Enfield armed it enough to be able to take on not just these models but also attract a wider audience? But well, that's exactly what we're going to find out in the course of this video. Like we said at the start, the Guerrilla is based on the Himalayan 450, and the engine as well as the mainframe has been carried over. There is no change to the gearbox as well. The only difference really in terms of drivetrain is a different rear sprocket. You've got a smaller rear sprocket now, but it also uses a smaller wheel. So overall, the gearing is similar, if not significantly taller compared to the Himalayan. What has changed, of course, is the suspension. You have regular telescopic forks up front. You've got a monoshock, just like on the Himalayan. This one's a linked one as well. But the travel is now down. You've got 140 mm of travel at the front. You've got 150 mm travel at the back. Enough travel really, but that's really the big difference in terms of suspension. And then of course, as you can see, it runs smaller wheels now. You've got 17-inch wheels front and rear. I love 17-inch wheels. It gives a motorcycle not just a lot of choice in terms of tire options, but also in terms of dynamic ability, in terms of braking. It helps in that regard. And we will get to that when we talk about the riding experience of the motorcycle. But yeah, so these are the main differences: the wheels, the suspension, and of course the style. Not only is the styling on the Guerrilla different from the Himalayan, the seating ergos are different as well. According to Royal Enfield, there is a forward tilt on this motorcycle in terms of the seating triangle. While on the Himalayan you were more upright, you had more forward set foot pegs, higher handlebar. Here you're slightly bent over, you've got a wide handlebar nonetheless, but it is lower, and you've got foot pegs that are slightly rear set and higher. So not only will this help in terms of higher ground clearance, cornering clearance when you're going around bends, but it also makes the riding experience more involving if you like riding fast or quickly. Now the engine might not have changed compared to the Himalayan, but the engine team has worked on the throttle response, and this is a ride-by-wire, so you have that initial take on the throttle is still not very sharp, but the build-up soon after that is, so it feels like it's got a quicker throttle, but of course not from the get-go. And the idea here is that they didn't want to make it snatchy, and it is not snatchy, but the build-up of power really is strong, and you can feel that, so it just gives the impression that it is quicker, but it's mainly down to how the throttle is. On this motorcycle, on the roads that we've been riding, this engine, we've had no problems at all in terms of coming out of corners. If you're above 3000 RPM, there is very strong pull in every gear, and you can really enjoy this engine. Downshift, upshift, all of that. Even the gearbox is smooth, it's nice, it's interactive, and it's an engine that is, yes, vibey once you are in the 5000 RPM range and above, but it's an engine that feels alive, and you can enjoy it if you really want to ride hard. I think this is more than up for it, and we've seen that on the Himalayan, but of course on the dirt course you're a little more careful. Here you can exploit it a lot more is what I feel, and I think it suits the Guerrilla quite well, even though there really isn't any change mechanically, but just in terms of how the throttle is calibrated. Now before we go any further, let's listen to what the motorcycle sounds like. I wanted to touch upon the tires of this motorcycle as well. Of course, like we said, that it runs 17-17, but what Royal Enfield has done, and this is something we haven't seen in this class of motorcycle, is that they've gone for a 120 front. 120 something that you see in superbikes. Most other motorcycles in this class run 100 or 110 section tires, so it's a fat tire. Similarly, at the back, you're running, the motorcycle is running a 160 section instead of a 150 or a 140, what is the general trend in this segment. So clearly the focus here is to not just give it more dynamic ability with these tires, but also visual girth. And Royal Enfield says that it is essentially to give it that retro, neo-retro vibe. And I was a little skeptical when we took it out because these are fat tires, which means flickability could become an issue. You'd have to put in a lot more steering input to get them to move around, but thankfully that's not the case. These are soft compound tires. These might have knobbies to give it a more, Royal Enfield says old school appeal, but I think they're more scrambler-like, but they work quite well on the road, surprisingly well. And even in terms of braking. So if you want proper road tires, you can go for a 110 front, even though this is 120 and 150 at the back. But even these tires, I think they were pretty impressive. Even in terms of flickability, we didn't have to really work the bike hard. And it gives Guerrilla its appeal in terms of dynamic appeal, because it is a long motorcycle, it is a heavy motorcycle, but the way it behaves on the road, I think Royal Enfield has done well with the tires and of course with how the suspension works. Now we spoke about the tires, that even though they're fat in a sense for this category of motorcycle, it's not really affected how the motorcycle handles. And that's of course down to the tires and also the suspension on this motorcycle. Now we said the frame was same, but there are changes made to the headstock. So now compared to the Himalayan, so you've got a sharper rake that you get with this motorcycle, and of course there's lesser travel. And so when we were out on the twisties, it's amazing how it hides its weight so well. So it tracks absolutely straight through corners. It's quite easy to just push the handlebar and have it fall into the corner, and then the feel from the tire, the feel from the chassis, and because of the improved cornering clearance, because of the way the footrest is moved, you don't really scrape anything and you can carry really good speeds through the corners. And it's a long wheelbase motorcycle, but it doesn't feel that. So this is where you can see some amount of magic on the Guerrilla, that you look at it, you look at the specs, and you feel that it might be cumbersome, to ride on tight, twisty roads, fast flowing roads, but no, it's not. It just eggs you on to try harder, go harder. Plus the brakes, it's still using sintered pads just like the Himalayan, and so there is a lot of bite, there's very good progression. You can lean onto the brakes while you enter the corner, and so it allows you to play with it, it allows you to have fun with it and be aggressive with it. So never through the ride we had today did I feel like it was not up to the task of being pushed hard. So clearly, if you want a motorcycle that's good dynamically, I think the Guerrilla does a very good job. It's not like motorcycles in this category are not up there. I think this is the minimum that the Guerrilla needed to do, because you look at the KTMs, you look at the Mavrick, you look at the Speed 400, these are motorcycles that handle really well. So, but the good or commendable part here is that with all that length and all that weight and those thick tires, Royal Enfield still made it handle well enough or good enough to keep up with the competition in the right hands, and I think that's a job well done. In terms of features, the Guerrilla continues to feature dual-channel ABS, but like the Himalayan, there is no traction control or adjustable levers or even a quick shifter. There are many GMA or genuine motorcycle accessories to choose from nonetheless. There is, however, one big change. The color TFT display might be similar to the Himalayan, but it gets an additional feature on the GRR. It now allows the rider to record the route he or she is taking and then transfer it to their smartphone for easy sharing. And lest we forget, because the Guerrilla 450 uses alloy wheels and not spoke rims, it now gets tubeless tires which are easily the widest in class. So what do we think about the Guerrilla 450 in the category that it comes in? So far, in the recent past, we've seen Royal Enfield produce motorcycles or bring out motorcycles that really charm the buyer. They really bring something special. You can feel that magic, you can feel that emotive nature in those motorcycles. That somehow is missing on the Guerrilla. It's not a bad motorcycle at all. Like we've said in this video, it's a nice motorcycle to ride. It does the things well, but it comes in a category where you have enough variety to choose from. And the Guerrilla, in our opinion, is not really offering something special for you to pick this one. Sure, if you want a Royal Enfield, if you want a large looking motorcycle that feels like a small bike when you're riding it around the twisties or under braking dynamically, yes, the Guerrilla makes sense. But is that reason enough for somebody to pick this? I don't know. Now, as the pricing comes into picture, could that make a big difference? Could that be the really, the reason why you might want to pick this over the competition? Well, that's something you as a viewer needs to decide, whether price is going to be important enough for this motorcycle. But overall, the Guerrilla is a good motorcycle, but not something that pulls at our heartstrings, and we have a feeling that with the colorways, which are not very strong for this motorcycle, they're bright, they're loud, they're in your face, but they're not something that make you go wow. So it is an uphill task for the Guerrilla, but maybe we could see Guerrilla change the market in terms of bringing in more numbers, because right now, if there's any motorcycle that can do that, this is the only one. Others have been there and we're not really seeing that much traction. So an uphill task for the Guerrilla, but I think with the right sort of marketing, maybe it could do well. But yeah, a good motorcycle that needed a little more magic is all I can say.